Hello, my name is Brad Thomas and I'm going to be doing a video blog on The Hairdresser, which was done at the Theater Practica. I saw this production while I was on my theater in Russia interim, where we went to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Russia's the kind of place where if the cold doesn't get you, the drunk men with knives will. But enough of that. What I wanted to talk to you about was The Hairdresser. So the overview of the story itself is it talks about a woman who is in a hair salon, and she basically cuts people's hair, and she gets letters from a man who's in prison who she wants to marry as soon as he gets out because he's getting out soon. And then she meets up with this fireman, and he's an interesting character in himself who sort of develops a crush, if you will, on her, and she tries to explain to him that she's already in love with someone else. Makes for an interesting love triangle and some other plot elements as well. And then the man in prison does eventually come out, and she meets up with him, and he turns out to be a crazy man out to kill her and steal all of her money. This play was done in the Theater Practica, and as far as the seating goes in the Theater Practica, if you're a big guy like me, it really becomes a problem because it's a very small stage. It's almost like a black box type stage, and there was a lot of people that wanted to see this play, so it was very, very crowded, not a whole lot of leg room. So the actual seating itself left much to be desired, but that's completely contradictory to the set itself. The set started out as a cardboard box and a mailbox, and then the cardboard box opened up in a pop-up book style, which allowed for a two-dimensional set, and it opened up multiple times. So all they had to do was undo the latches and pull it open to get a new type of environment. At first, I really did not like the set at all. I thought it was just going to be a terrible way to try and do this. It was just going to end up failing miserably, but it turned out to work very well. The actors were very good at using the elements of the stage. Some of the chairs actually pulled out, even though they were only pop-up, and there were also props that were conveniently placed in the stage to make it look like they were part of the stage, but then they were pulled out and utilized later on. The set and the props were both two-dimensional, as well as the acting, which I'll explain later. But it was very interesting because you could never tell where the next prop was going to come out of in this pop-up book. Because a prime example of this would be when she pulled out the chairs. Later on, she pulled out the chairs, and then she pulled out a head from the chair by flipping the head up above the chair, and then she made it look like she was actually cutting hair, which I thought was a really interesting take on it. And I thought that the set and the props worked very well, and the director did a very good job of utilizing what he had. The acting was also done in two dimensions, so what it would resemble is it would be kind of like, instead of turning your shoulders or doing any real movements or walking, you would have, like, instead of any hand movements like this, you would have just like hand movements that kind of went across the stage and back. And they walked like that. Sometimes they would turn their head like this, but then they wouldn't turn it any other way. They'd just talk like this. And it was a really interesting approach to it. And there was actually even a cardboard cutout. There were two cardboard cutouts of human characters. One of them was of the other hairdresser, who was a secondary character in the play, and she would actually pull it out at times that she wasn't really part of any of the action that was going on, and she would just leave the stage, and there she was, just standing there with a book in her hand that she wasn't really reading because the character was listening to conversations the whole time. She was just a really big eavesdropper, and she liked to interject in parts of the conversation where she really didn't belong. And there were some other things too, like as far as sitting would go, they would sit just very straight in a two-dimensional fashion. And one of the props that they did have that was three-dimensional was this like T that they used to sit down. They would actually fold it out and they would sit on the top of the T. It was a wooden T, and then they would just sit on it in order to be able to mimic like sitting down in an actual chair, because there were no chairs on stage. As far as the acting itself, aside from two dimensions, I thought it had a lot of depth. I thought it showed a lot of emotions, even in two dimensions, and it even kind of brought me back to my childhood and the days when I was playing like Super Mario Brothers. So that really kind of made me feel good. I also, when reading the text of the play, did not find it to be nearly as funny as when it was actually done in the play. I thought it was done very well. They made it a lot funnier than what I had read it to be. I really didn't catch some of the humor that they took out of it. Like, there was a part where the main character and the fireman were dancing with each other, and it was just absolutely ridiculous when done in 2 dimensions, and it was like the disco or whatever. But I really didn't find it to be that funny in the play, so I thought it was a really good choice by the director to go with a 2-dimensional style. The lighting that was done on stage was just fantastic. When they were at the disco scene, there was like blues and reds, and they were flashy and whatnot, but at the same time, then when the man escapes from prison and he's kind of like talking to himself, he's got like, the whole place is pretty much dimmed up except for one light that's going down on his face that gives him this really sinister look. And I thought it was really done well as far as the lighting. It was all done on cue. There was no late lighting or anything like that. They were very good with that. And the same can be said about the sound effects. I thought that the sound effects were just spot on. They were really funny. I mean, they had some really kooky music for the disco, and they had some really interesting sound effects when necessary. It was just really done well, and all the people back behind the scenes, so to speak, that are working on the lighting and the sound, they were all very, very timely, and they paid very close attention to the play itself. Overall, I'd have to say, originally, I really didn't think I was going to like the play, and it turned out to be one of my favorite plays that I've seen on the entire trip. I just thought that the elements were used very well. The director did a fantastic job with using 2 dimensions, and the actors really understood and were aware of their own body movements as well as the stage itself. I mean, they just had a very, very clean and crisp stage awareness as well as body movements. It was done very well. We actually all had the opportunity to talk to the cast after the performance was done, and what a lot of things that they talked about, that we asked questions about, were the 2 dimensions and how they adjusted to it, or how they even came up with the idea. Originally, they hadn't planned on using 2 dimensions. They planned on using 3 dimensions, but it just wasn't working. The director wasn't getting what he wanted to out of it, and so he talked to the actors and he suggested the 2-dimensional idea, and after they thought about it for a little while, they decided to go with it. They stuck with it, and it ended up being really, really good. I really loved it. And another thing that they really wanted to portray through the play itself as it was going was the stereotypes that a lot of people in Russia like to define people by, like the typical Russian bad guy or the typical clueless woman, so to speak, which would be the main character here, hoping and believing in things that are just crazy and way out there. And I thought that it really did convey that throughout the entire production, not only in the fact that they were Russian stereotypes, but there were also stereotypes that I could personally relate to as far as Americans are concerned. I mean, there's people like that everywhere all around the world, and I think that the whole concept of trying to portray these types of stereotypes was really well done. And the actors just really, they were just really into the idea. They loved it. They went with it. The 2-dimensional thing, they stuck to it. They practiced it for a while. I think they said that they did sometime around a year's worth of practice, but it was sporadic and spaced out. And when they really, really started hammering it through, it took them a couple months to finally get everything finalized and ready to go. Bottom line is, I think that it's definitely a play worth seeing. And if you ever get a chance to go to the Theater Practica here or actually be over in Moscow, because now I'm in St. Petersburg, you should definitely check it out, because they tend to have a lot of plays that really are avant-garde, and they go away from the normal and they experiment with different things. And the one that I saw I was very impressed with.